Competing in bracket is where your practice counts. It's where you finally have the chance to make a name for yourself in the community, or really focus your practice on your problem spots. But some problems can arise in the heat of competition. Dropping 2 sets means you're out of the tournament, and your round 2 opponent just destroyed you game 1. You can't afford to lose another game, or you have to make a huge loser's run. So how do you fix your problem spots before you thrust into game 2 in just under a minute? And no, the answer is not to switch characters. I promise you, you can make it work with Byleth. Your Dr. Mario Pocket isn't as hot as you might think he is. Hey everyone, this is Coach TurtleKing, and I'm really excited for today's workout. I'm going to be teaching you the way that I, celebrated competitive superstar, adapt quickly in bracket using the power of archetypes and stereotypes. Because even I sometimes don't play like a top player game 1, and I need to adapt after losing horribly. This topic is going to be a series of 2 videos since there's a lot to talk about. So make sure you tune into part 2 where I'll cover some additional archetypes to flesh out the strategy. Let's begin! Stereotypes are generally bad. When you're trying to get to know people, you need to take the time to get to know their authentic self, and not to come to conclusions based on their appearance or even their first few sentences. Thing is, in competitive games, you're not really trying to get to know your opponent over a nice long dinner. You have a single best of 3 to say hi, see how they present themselves, and come up with the fastest and most effective pickup line of all time. The metaphor may have collapsed in on itself, but what I'm trying to get at is that all you need to be able to do is to come to a conclusion on your opponent's playstyle as fast as possible. Here's an example for your warm-up. Look at this player's gameplay and think to yourself some adjectives that you would use to describe them. What if this opponent was your bracket opponent? What are you looking out for? So what's the trick? It's this. Establish what archetype of player your opponent falls into, and implement the counterplay to that archetype. Then, as the game continues, you can make slight adjustments to the stereotype by noting when your opponent does something that you didn't quite expect, and you can adjust your counterplay accordingly. That might sound complicated, but let's go over some of these archetypes, and you can start adapting really, really quickly. The first archetype is the aggressive player, or more bluntly put, the masher. The masher is someone who responds to most situations with attacks and options designed to quickly pull momentum back into their favor. You'll be able to recognize a masher when they're using aerials out of juggles and combos, keeping up an intense shield pressure game through the use of lagless moves, and usually through a character choice that facilitates that playstyle. Players who play characters such as Fox, Ness, and Roy tend to be drawn in by their slew of offensive options, and plan to abuse them as much as possible. These aggressive players also tend to go for preemptive options such as lingering nairs when ledge trapping, rather than trying to wait and react. In order to beat the masher, you must let them overextend and punish them hard. Play defensive and hover just outside of their active range. When they decide to pull the trigger, punish them with a well-spaced punish. One of the best ways to beat a masher is just to keep in mind that there's always another attack coming. If your opponent whiffs a move, but said move had extremely low lag, position yourself to land a punish on their next attack, not the one they just missed. Effective positions include full hopping directly over them and landing with a powerful landing aerial, or stuffing their next option with a quick range poke. Moving into the range and moving out, and then placing a smash attack where you just were is a powerful way to call someone out if you really have the read on them as well. The second archetype is the passive player, usually known as the camper. I want to quickly note that these playstyle archetypes are valid playstyles for success, and the negative connotation carried by terms such as masher or camper are not to be used to belittle your opponent, but instead used to boost your own confidence. It's crucial that you can believe that you can quickly adapt to and dispatch of your opponent's strategies, and I find that it helps greatly to treat all opponents like you would a random online opponent when going into an actual set. I'll talk more about how to strategically manage your ego like a resource in a future workout. But coming back to this current archetype, the camper is a broad term used to describe passive manners of play, with small variations needing to be recognized on a case-by-case basis. It can mean a player who plays a zoner like Samus and just tries to keep you away from them, Or it could be someone who's playing a very fast character but refuses to make the first move in an attempt to bait you into swinging at them. Passive players tend to pick defensive options when being pressured. Rolls, air dodges, spot dodges, and dashes away are all extremely common. Keep in mind which of these options your opponent goes for the most, since you may be able to narrow down your stereotype into a spot dodger or a roll out of the corner. If you gather enough information, anytime I'm against a zoning or like a bait and punish playstyle, watch my workout video on the bait and punish strategy. I'll quickly label them as a camper and I'll execute my counter. So what is the counter? Read their defensive options. You never want to swing at where a passive player is, but instead you want to press in close and force them to make the first move through the threat of your presence. They don't want to swing first, but getting close enough to them and showing that you refuse to take the bait can be enough to corner them or force them to make a decision. If they continue to refuse, then you can start exerting your pressure by calling out their methods of escaping the corner. Or just swinging right at where they are in order to remind them that inaction is not safe. As long as you keep your head cool and you don't take the bait against passive players, you'll be able to exert much more pressure on them than they can on you. To cap off part 1, I want you to take a look at this gameplay from a local held at my university. Pretend your opponent is Luigi, and you're the Samus, and take mental notes on their playstyle as fast as you can. What are you noticing? Which playstyle would you place them under? Take a look for a little bit. Watching this footage, the very first thing I'm noticing is that they started the first engagement of the match. Look at how they're always placing forward airs preemptively in places where they think Samus might be. Another huge giveaway to their playstyle is what they do after missing an attack in a close quarter scramble. Do they panic and back away, or do they swing again? After missing a dash attack, Luigi decided to throw out a back air. 15 seconds in, and there's already plenty of valuable information you could use to classify Diz as an aggressive player who always wants to make the first engagement. How would you beat this type of player? Think about it. How would you beat this player? Come up with a plan. Remember what I said before? The correct answer is to respect their presence and wait for them to overcommit in your threat range. Let them whiff or make a mistake as they're trying to cover where you are, and punish them after they make said mistake. So that's the end of part 1, but in the next video, we'll be covering some additional archetypes that you can add to your mental toolkit. The more minute details you can start noticing about your opponent, the more quickly you can adapt to certain situations. And having more archetypes and smaller categorizations of counterplay that you could implement into your matches will help you adapt faster. I promise you that taking a minute to consider these things during and between games will make you adapt much faster and win many more sets. This was Coach TurtleKing, and I'll see you all in part 2. Peace!